Seneca, Chief Cornplanter. Although his skin was uncommonly light for an Indian, his eyes were those of an Indian, for they were dark, intensely dark, even black, and at the same time strangely luminous. They were deep, absorbing eyes, and a great melancholy abided in them. The Hatchet and the Plow, The Life and Times of Chief Cornplanter by William Betts, Jr. Born in 1752 as John de Beale III, of Seneca and Dutch descent, he was given the name Cornplanter or Gayantwake, which means by what one plants. He was a chief and a diplomat. He was a warrior as well. He was a spokesman for his people. He worked with the New World people who had stumbled into this continent and pushed inwards. He worked exceptionally well for a very long time. He welcomed them into schools that he had arranged for and built in some circumstances within the confines of his earned land. Note that I say earned, not given. You cannot give what you already embrace and enjoy as your own. Let's look at some of the official tellings of Chief Cornplanter. He did some amazing things during his life. He was a war chief, and is said that he fought in the French and Indian War at only 17 years old on the side of the British, and then in the Revolutionary War, where he fought for the British as well. He had personally rallied against becoming involved in the Revolutionary War at all, but because their elder brothers, the Iroquois, had chosen to support the British, he followed. As a war chief leading, he was very active in the siege of Stanwix. At the Battle of Wyoming, he led along with the Butler's Rangers, where they massacred over 300 colonials and patriots in what was followed by looting and burning of villages, where no non-combatants were injured. He also led at the Cherry Valley Massacre. Unfortunately, non-combatants were killed and taken captive during that event. Following these two conflicts, the Continentals set out to destroy the Native American allies to the British. They fought them viciously, and Cornplanter recalled that his warriors perished in protecting the refugees of their villages as they made their way to Fort Niagara for protection. The Continentals sent Sullivan's expedition in pursuit of the Native Americans. Sullivan's expedition had a scorched earth policy and destroyed food stores and other needed items, leading to Cornplanter and his warriors nearly starving to death in the winter. In the battle near the Mohawk, toward the end of the war, they raided areas around the Mohawk River when one day a European man was brought to the chief. It was his father, whom he had only met once before. His father was very receptive in remembering his son, and Cornplanter gave him the option of joining his own family or returning to his European family. John de Beale Jr. went to his European family. The war ended soon after. Cornplanter, knowing the horrible effects that opposing the Continentals would have on his people in the wake of the war, sat and began negotiating with the new Americans. He led negotiations after the war to maintain neutrality for the Seneca. He was able to stay in the States, and he was instrumental in the Treaty of Stanwix and the Treaty of Canandaigua. He was involved in additional treaties as well, all of which were to maintain neutrality during the Northwest Indian War, a neutrality that was beginning to be difficult, but he knew that he must maintain for his people's sake and the sake of the Seneca nation of Indians. He represented only a small portion, but it had big stakes. He adhered to the principles of preservation of his people. But he met with Washington himself to negotiate these peace treaties and understand that Washington was known to the Native Americans as a town destroyer because they did not take well to the Native Americans opposing them during the Revolutionary War, and they continued to destroy and punish the Native American villages. Cornplanter pointed out that they were neutral during the fighting in Ohio and Indiana, or the Northwest Indian Wars, where the fight was over white man's encroachment as they pushed their way further into the continent. He went to Philadelphia and continued to be a diplomat to protect Seneca lands. He went to Washington, the new capital, to continue, again, always striving to maintain balance and justice for his people. He simply said to Washington, "Great Father, why do you continue to crush us? If we are to become your children who follow, learn, and will support you in the form of a country, why do you continue to kill us?" Finally, Washington wrote a letter. He halted the destruction and the invasion of the Native American villages, and he said, "Chief Cornplanter, Your great object seems to be the security of your remaining lands. I mean to be clear that in the future you cannot be defrauded of your lands, that you possess the right to sell, the right of refusal to sell your lands, that therefore the sale of your lands in the future will depend entirely upon yourselves. George Washington. He vowed to honor all prior treaties as well. Cornplanter was given a tract of land in reward for his helping broker some peace with Native American tribes in the West. The tract was granted to live on in perpetuity as a show of friendship and gratitude. He did well, and in the course, he tried to learn more and more, knowing that learning English ways was the only way they would survive. Interesting, he never learned how to speak English, but he strived to be involved in learning all English ways. He embraced European American traditions and tried to integrate with the society, and he was fond of the Quakers because they did not try to convert the Native Americans, but rather teach new ways and skills, and Cornplanter welcomed the learning of animal husbandry and carpentry and even blacksmithing. He expanded the efforts of Native American men in growing and tending crops, which was primarily a woman's duty. He invited the Quakers to teach in schools within his territory. He continued to promote peace with the whites. He got a peace pipe from Washington and another letter of praise, that all miseries of the late war shall be forgotten and buried forever. But Cornplanter watched his people fall into drunkenness and debauchery, and they began to whittle away. He watched them losing their way and losing their efforts to maintain their own culture and even property. He worried that there was a potential white man land grab. He finally said, "Great Spirit was talking to me." He witnessed a Native American decline under white man. He became angry, and he showed a little more disdain for whites. He shuttered the doors of the schools and lost pride in his prior accomplishments. He burned his military uniform and destroyed his medals. He returned to the Seneca beliefs and ways. He embraced his brother, Handsome Lake, and worked from that point on to help his people. Chief Cornplanter was open in his conversations with the Great Spirit, who instructed him to cut ties with the white man, the conquerors, and discard knowledge that was given to him by the palefaces. He disavowed the white way of life and mistreating his people from the past. There was once a statement that he made while aboard a steamship traveling up the Allegheny River. Cornplanter noted with some impressiveness the steamship power and how it worked, while also expressing, quote, "White man will do anything to avoid using his muscles," unquote. But through it all, he was quite influential enough to lead his people and establish a tract of land that varied from 750 to 1,500 acres for him and his heirs forever in perpetuity. At the turn of the 19th century, over 400 Seneca were living on that tract of land. This was quite an accomplishment, and the Cornplanter tract remained with his heirs till 1960, when they took away the land to flood it for the Kinzua Dam on the Allegheny River. This was to prevent downriver flooding. They moved those few remaining ancestors to the Allegheny Reservation under the Seneca Nation of New York. The Seneca refer to that part of the Allegheny River as the Lake of Deception or the Lake of Betrayal. They had lost their land. The ancestors relocated Cornplanter's remains, and they erected a monument to his memory. A great deal of Cornplanter's direct descendants had passed away in the Spanish flu. His last descendant passed away in 1957. Cornplanter had requested no stone marker for when he passed. In 1866, Pennsylvania State installed a monument over his grave, thought to be the first erected in honor of a Native American in the U.S. During a dedication, the Honorary James Ross Snowden of Philadelphia stated, "He was a dauntless warrior and wisest statesman of his nation, a patriarch of his tribe and a peacemaker of his race. He was a model man from nature's mold, truth, temperance, justice, and humanity. Never had a nobler incarnation or a more earnest and consistent advocate than he, as we loved him personally and revere the noble, manly character he bore. We erect this tribute to his memory, that those who live after us may know and imitate his virtues. These are just fractions of the stories of his efforts and successes of Cornplanter. Much more can be learned from several reading sources. Legends of the Iroquois by Cornplanter himself. Book is written by William Canfield and can be found online. 30 Years a Hunter by Philip Tome. The Hatchet and the Plow, The Life and Times of Chief Cornplanter by William Betts, Jr. Before I close with one last and best description of Cornplanter in his latter years, I want to thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you like explorations, culture, rock art, history, and other topics like this. Get ready because we hope to share more with you, and leave a comment. We love to interact as well. The final description from Cornplanter himself was, "I'm an aged hemlock tree whose top is dead, but the branches alone are green." Philip Tome described him, Cornplanter being in his 80s at this point and during his last and final days. He said, "His chest was sunken and his shoulders were drawn forward, making the upper part of his body resemble a trough. He had but one eye, and even the socket of the lost organ was hid by the overhanging brow resting high on his cheekbone. His remaining eye was the blackest and the brightest hue. Never have I seen one that equaled it in its brilliancy. He had a full head of hair, white as a driven snow, which covered a head of ample dimension and admirable shape."